It is 1 o'clock. I will call this meeting of the Douglas County Planning Commission to order. Paul, will you please lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
It is now time for opening public comment. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per speaker on matters over which the Planning Commission has jurisdiction. The Planning Commission wants to encourage respectful consideration of all views by members of the public. If content is disruptive, disrespectful, irrelevant, or offensive, the individual will be asked to stop speaking. Public comment will also be taken on agenda items that are identified for possible action, and we will have closing public comment. I will now open public comment. Please sign the roster, say your name for the record into the microphone. First speaker, please.
Good afternoon. Oh, that's way too loud. Good afternoon, Ellie Waller. I'm looking forward to this body of people having a better understanding of upcoming zoning changes for the Barton proposal up in Lake Tahoe. It's be an interesting process for you because you won't be looking at the hospital project. You will be just looking at the rezoning being generated by that project. There'll be lots of information, I'm sure, coming forward as the environmental document gets released for public review. It'll be a 60-day review. And I'm hoping at that time you'll start taking a look at the project and how it's evolving. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ellie. It's nice to see you. Seeing no one else rise, I will close public comment. It is now time for approval of the agenda. Are there any changes? Seeing none. Bryce, do you have a motion? Is there a second? We have a motion by Bryce, a second by Lori. All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes with one absent, Dan St. John. Approval of the minutes. Any corrections? Jim?
Madam Chairman, I gave the corrections to the clerk on page 19. The word spending should have been descending area in relation to the floodplain. So she has that correction. With that, I'd like to move to approve the minutes.
Are there any other corrections? No? Is there a second? We have a motion by Jim, a tie for second, but I think Paul slid in there. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. And Dan St. John is absent. Item 1. Are there any discussions for item 1? Paul?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am a VHR holder, but I don't think it will modify, alter, or bias me in any way.
Okay, there's one. Kirk?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to disclose that I do not have any financial interest in VHRs, nor do any of my immediate family members or close personal friends.
But you do live in Tahoe. And I would like to disclose that I attended 2 of the VHR board meetings when they were discussing changes to the ordinance. And I did speak at one of the meetings and asked that the VHR board consider a change, which they did incorporate into the ordinance that we are going to review, and that will be brought forward by Ernie later in his presentation. Are there any other? Jim?
When I was running for county commissioner last year, I did express support for VHRs, and I did get financial support from people who do support them. I don't think that's going to affect how I'm going to vote on this, but I wanted to disclose that.
Thank you for that. Seeing no others, I will read this into the, well, I'll use this instead of what I typed. For possible action, discussion regarding ordinance 2025-1655, an ordinance amending Chapter 20.622 of the Douglas County Code, the Lake Tahoe Vacation Home Rental Ordinance, VHR, amendments to the VHR ordinance including but are not limited to consolidating renter requirements into a new section and referring those requirements as a code of conduct, clarifying restrictions on VHRs in residential communities north of Cave Rock State Park, amending insurance requirements, amending regulations regarding wait lists and renewal applications, revising requirements related to local contacts, and amending and reorganizing certain penalties and procedures for violations. Affected properties are those within the Tahoe Basin. The applicant is Douglas County. Ernie Strelo presenting. Oh, also, I would like to acknowledge VHR Chair Keith Byers and Board Member Mickey Hempler.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Ernie Strelo for the record. The program manager for, this is one of my projects that I get to come to work and look forward to every day. As you can tell, my boss is sitting far away from me. And the district attorney that supports me is far away from me also. I appreciate your time today, and I apologize for last month. There was a noticing issue that occurred that forced us to postpone this meeting to this month. I know stormwater and VHRs in the same month would have been more fun, but here we are. So what I'm going to go through is mostly minor changes, I think, that have been proposed for the code, the VHR code. This is, I think, we're going on the 7th change in 4 years on the code. The VHRs. If you're not familiar, I think most of you guys are familiar with the VHRs by now, but if you're not, all the VHRs in Douglas County are co-located in the Tahoe Basin, and Douglas County there's other counties around the lake and municipalities that have their own programs that they run independent under their own rules. But our program, we formalized it in 2005. And it was in Title V and then moved to Title 20 a few years back. And so because there are ZTAs involved, we bring it through you so you can review it. So I'll go through some pages here. I think you might have read the packet that talk to some of the individual changes that are in the code. The 20.622 is the actual code where you see the red lines. Those are where the changes are. What the presentation does here is summarize most of those changes. So there may be changes that were in the code that I didn't put in the presentation based on time or how it might just been a wordsmithing change. But if you have questions on that, ask, and one of us should be able to answer that. Any questions? Go ahead and start, and then stop me anytime. I mean, this is kind of a process. So. This is the calendar. I like to kind of educate more of the public on the process that we're going through right now. So the VHR Advisory Board, of which a couple of the members are in the audience here today, spent around 10 hours, along with additional time for appeals that were going on at the same time, to talk about some code changes that were asked for by the Board of County Commissioner Chair and one of the commissioners. To take a look at, and they did. And so they spent a lot of time debating and talking about the different things. And as we go through this, you'll see some of the things that were in the code that were proposed that they may have agreed with or may not have agreed with. And so right now we're coming through you. We anticipate to do a first reading next Thursday here at the Board of County Commissioners meeting. I expect it'll be just a reading, but you never know with VHRs. The second reading would be in Tahoe at the courthouse in October. That's anticipated dates. Could change, but that's what we're hoping to get done. I never changed this map too much, but because it doesn't really change. So this is kind of where the density is of where the VHRs are located up in Tahoe. So 73% of the VHRs are located in the KGID area of responsibility along Kingsbury, through Tahoe Beach Club and so forth in that area. So that's where the bucket is. Some of them are in Elks Point if you go north, and Round Hill, and there's some in Zephyr Cove. And then, as you are probably aware, north of Cave Rock Cove on the beach side, there's really no VHRs except for the HOA part of Glenbrook. So there's currently, I think I have a little map here next. Yep, there it is. So this I updated, I think a month or two ago. This is the VHR trend over since November 2022. So the peak that you see there, about a third of the way through, is around June 2023 when we did the massive code change for most of the code that you see today. When we did the joint code enforcement, VHR board, and BOCC meeting up in Tahoe at the Hard Rock Cafe, or at that time the Hard Rock Cafe, and then TRPA subsequently. We made massive code changes. This has been the trend of the VHR permitting. So right now we're at 535. It seems to have plateaued while it shows the trend going down, down, down. It's actually starting to level off. So, you know, there's a variety of reasons why the permits change hands. You know, they can, you know, if you sell a property, the permit has to close. They can have a permit pulled and they lose it, which we do frequently based on the appeals that we deal with. But we typically net, we were netting about -2 a month until the last couple months, and now it's starting to net out at 0. Yes, sir.
With an apology,
No apology
Paul
needed.
Bruno, on your density map, and with the comments you just made, are the yellow dots 15% by all of them by the ordinance, the current ordinance, or is that just the number that we see reflected, the distribution of the number that we see reflected in
It's a
this?
distribution of the number.
Okay,
Ernie
so
Strailer for the record.
has
This-
nothing to do with permitted density
No.
under the code?
No, so the trick, so just to explain that a little further, the density is explained. There's 39 neighborhoods that have independent density requirements, right? And so there could be a neighborhood, for instance, over by Stagecoach. You know, if you go skiing, it's 40% is the designated limit for that neighborhood, which is around 450 properties, right? Well, we're only at 16%, but it could go that high. There's other neighborhoods, most of the neighborhoods are 15%. There's a couple special neighborhoods like Lincoln Park that actually have density requirements. They're house spacing requirements. So it's a little bit different. So I do a measurement on that. I just don't show it because most people don't know all the neighborhoods when I show it. But there is a cap in Tahoe and numerically of 600. We've never hit 600, but I guess you could hit it if you fill up Tahoe Summit.
Thank you.
You bet. Good. So I just kind of throw this in here because it comes up every time I go through this code change. This is, I think it's the part of the fifth paragraph, second to last sentence of the operating objectives. You know, when you go into 20.622, that the intent of the Lake Tahoe ordinance is to make transitory lodging activity permitted in the chapter resemble existing residential uses made by resident owners of lessees. And I don't normally like to harp on it, but it comes up a lot, and I think it's important that this is what the VHR board looks at when they're trying to think about how to create density and how to make adjustments into the different neighborhoods when they're looking at the code. So what I'll go through here is, I'm not going to read all this, but this is kind of the different focus areas that we'll talk about from Glenbrook down to ending with the vacation home advisory membership requirement changes that that the board talked about, that the Board of County Commissioners asked the VHR board to take a look at. And so they came up with a recommendation, and we'll talk about that. So I'll kind of jump into the first section here. So this is probably one of the easier ones. So in Glenbrook, the way we designate the neighborhoods in Glenbrook is there's a north, south, there's condos, and there's one or two other neighborhoods. And the way the code was written unintentionally is that particular area of Glenbrook, we only allow homeowners to rent their houses to fellow homeowners that live in that area. So they can rent to family of a homeowner, but they can only they can't advertise as a normal VHR like they do the rest of Tahoe right now. And that's been like that for many years. And the way we had documented the code, I guess a year and a half ago when we were making changes, or we figured it out, is that it seemingly eliminated, if you own a condo in Glenbrook, to be able to rent your condo to a single family owner of an HOA property in Glenbrook. The way it was worded, it looked like a violation. And so we actually wrote a county letter to permit those neighborhoods to rent to other Glenbrook homeowners in the Glenbrook area, because that was actually an omission on our part. So what we proposed to do is we made a change to the wording from within the same residential community to following residential communities. So the following communities, and if you read the code itself, it'll name out the particular neighborhoods in Glenbrook that we're talking about. But the intent is just to clarify that they don't need a letter anymore to do it, but that they can, rent to, somebody in a condo can rent to somebody that's a single family owner in Glenbrook or one of the other surrounding Glenbrook communities that are HOA driven. So that's all that does is clean it up. And I put a little note on there what that was. Any questions? Okay. The next one is Lincoln Park. So you heard me talk a few minutes ago about Lincoln Park as one of those density-driven neighborhoods. It's actually, I think, the only one that's a density-driven neighborhood. What we did is we wrote a whole half a page about that neighborhood and how we select wait lists and all that stuff. That stuff is staying in there. What we were proposing to remove is the introduction part, how you get started. And so because it doesn't apply anymore. It applied only to the first time that when we implemented Lincoln Park's density restrictions. It's not going to be ever applicable again. So we marked up the code so you can see that, and then we just kind of noted it on there that generally the VHR board agreed with that change. And that's about it. That was pretty easy. It only changes like a paragraph or something in there. But we left everything else in there. So we still go through the revocations and the allocations and all that stuff. Right? Any questions? Okay. I guess you're going to save the good questions for last, huh? Wait list, surprisingly, as you're going to find out about the chair's comment too, of what she found, we have wait list listed in the code, but we actually didn't have a definition of what a wait list is, right? Right. So when in our excitement to change the code often, we didn't actually put a definition in there for the wait list. So we added a section that codifies what the practice of a wait list is, right? So you know what we're talking about. You have a place to look at. I know Commissioner Bruno would love to see that, so that's a pretty simple change. You okay with that? Okay. If you think of something later, let me know and I'll see if I can answer it. So this one generated some discussion. So this has come up a couple years ago too, and I think I have it in the backup slides of a proposal back in 2023 related to insurance changes. We've had a couple insurance companies come and recommend, because the VHRs are typically insured as a commercial enterprise, whether we call them commercial or not, it doesn't matter. That's how they insure it. It's a little bit more, I guess it's a little bit different in terminology and cost. And so there was recommendations that we change it to $1 million for all tiers and just make it one. Yes, ma'am.
I would like to acknowledge that Commissioner Dan St. John has joined the meeting.
Thank you. Ernie Strelo for the record. Welcome, Commissioner St. John. Good to see you again. As I mentioned, you know, it was recommended that we go to $1 million. Some of the arguments that were discussed that are very valid nowadays with fires, wildfire safety and so forth, is that it's difficult to get insurance in the basin. As I understand it, I don't live in the basin, so I don't know, but from what I'm told, it's difficult. And it's much more expensive as it is, right? So this was something that, because of that and because of the difficulty getting insurance and the cost associated with it, the VHR board was not inclined to support that change to $1 million. That's fine. That's one of two changes. The second change was to change the wording that's in our code from named insured. Douglas County was a named insured, which meant that we were getting copies of everybody's policy, even though we get copies of everybody's policy when you apply for your permit, right? So I was getting a lot of policies, and we were doing a lot of shredding. So to change it to additional interest, and then what additional interest does is we don't get notified when you have insurance. We get notified if your insurance gets canceled, right? So we want to know if you had insurance, you applied for a permit, and then we get a notice that says, Paul didn't pay his insurance, and so we canceled it. We pull his permit, right? You got to have insurance. That's part of the deal, right? So we still get notified if you make changes. If you cancel your insurance, we can come back to you and say, do you have a new policy? If you don't tell us it on your own. So it helps us get notified whenever you're changing your insurance on your house that you're renting out. Yes, sir, Commissioner McCallum.
On the discussion whether it was 500,000 or $1 million, and I know some insurance agents, I understand the problems. Was it ever discussed that it should be more than 500,000, even if it couldn't be $1 million? Or was that kind of looked at as a one or the other?
I think Commissioner McCallum, Ernie Strelo for the record, I don't recall that particular argument because we were going through a lot of material at the time. A couple of years ago, I think it was discussed, and like I said, it's in the backup. We had discussions up to $2 million at one point, but that was a different time. Maybe insurance was different then, and cheaper, easier to get. I don't know, but I don't recall that particular conversation where somebody suggested, "Hey, let's do 700,000." I don't recall that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bruno.
I take responsibility. This is the second Bruno amendment having to do with the insurance from long ago. But I'd like to ask our district attorney whether the additional insured versus the interest language changes the rights that the county may have with respect to direct action against the insurance company.
It's AJ Hames for the record. I think that this is sufficient to cover the county's potential liability. Like Mr. Strelo stated, it was never really the intent of this provision to protect the county from a claim. The county has other protections already. We have insurance. There are limitations on a government entity's liability. And so really the idea was we just wanted to get notice. So we're still covered under our other protections, and now we'll still have notice. We're just making it a little bit easier for people to get their insurance policies.
Thank you.
Oh, good. Ernie Strela for the record. We'll move on then. Okay. The next one is TOT. So it was suggested earlier this year that it started off that it was insinuated that there might be one or two people out in the population that like the hog permits when they apply for them. and that the one night minimum for renting per year is not sufficient because it locks up permits. Now, I don't have a lot of data that indicates that's happening for real, because we do look at TOT collections mainly to make sure that they're current, right? I don't really study them for how many nights, as long as they rent one time a year, it shows, that there was a bill and they paid it. However, the idea was there was a suggestion to increase it to 8 nights a year to show that the property is being utilized properly and that the county can collect TOT for the purpose of the permit, right? So you don't pay the $2,000 or whatever it is you're paying for the permit and then lock it up, and that's the end of it for the county. Whereas you can have a homeowner that's renting it out to the public multiple times a year, and the county collects multiple TOT collections per year. I think that the VHR board, I want to use the word agnostic. There was some talk about this. I don't know if there was a clear majority on this one way or the other, but I think that we just moved on after that. But for this purpose, the 8 days it doesn't, you can make it any days really. You can make it 4, you can make it 10. I don't know if there's a right number if you want to if you did want to change this, or if you're inclined to do that. And it might be interesting to see if you guys have any thoughts on that, or no thoughts on that, or.
Any questions? Paul?
I can suggest to you the genesis of this, and that is with respect to condominiums that are considerably different from single-family dwellings, and yet we're all under the same code. Condominium owners, if they have a limitation, let's suppose 15% of the community can be VHR. Mm-hmm. If you have a number of single day rentals in a condominium, you have a tremendous turnover, and it's a little bit more disrupting, going against the guiding principle that you began your discussion with. So the 1 day I can see as being a detriment with respect to the overriding objectives and guiding principles of the VHR. Now, there are certain individuals within developments that might also see that if you have a management role where an individual takes a VHR permit and only rents it 1 night as kind of cheating not only the revenue to the county, but the revenue to the management company with respect to their role on a given VHR. Now that, or condominium complex. So I would say you've struck a nice balance here, because the condominiums are in a completely different circumstance. If you have 5 or 6 in a small building that has 10 units, for example, but within the community it's not 15% because the community is larger, it would be, and has been proven to, by my perception, disruptive, problematical, particularly when there were one night stays. So I think you've done a great job in striking, and so did the committee, in striking a balance with the 8 days, because then you have to be a sincere renter of VHR, while at the same time you don't multiply the single day use, which would be very disruptive in a condominium circumstance. I think one of the, if I may, I apologize to go one step further, one of the reasons why we did not this time, compared to last times that the ordinance has come before us, have a tremendous number of opposition. One of the reasons, there are others which I'll talk about, but one of the reasons is because the ordinance protects that guiding principle. And this is just another example. You won't have disrupted condominium projects by individuals trying to protect themselves, either by grabbing all of the VHRs and renting it out for 1 night, or renting, say, 5 of them 1 night each. And I have to commend the committee and your department and you, sir. I didn't get any comments this time. And the other one, I had 32 comments on our last. Thank you.
Any other comments? Thank you.
I
You
guess
may
we'll-
continue.
Ernie Strela for the record. I guess it won't revoke your permit. Okay. So this one, the chair of the VHR committee and I, we like data, and so we actually pulled data on this. And so what the proposal was, right now what we have is we have a property manager requirement for 10 occupancy or higher. And how that works is that unless you live within an hour of the VHR and have an emergency contact within a half an hour of the VHR, you're required to have a property manager. The 8s, the 9s, the 8s, and so forth, all the way down to 0, 1, I guess 0 wouldn't matter, do not require a property manager. They require an emergency contact. So you can live anywhere in the world as a property manager, 9 occupancy or lower, but as long as you have an emergency contact within 30 minutes and has taken the tests and all that stuff. And so the thinking, I've had a couple appeals, and this was more probably personal experience. I had a couple appeals where people, I don't think have ever been to Tahoe that own property and were renting it out. And the properties tended to be disasters when we got involved in it, with some violations. And so for me, it seemed like, well, if these people had a property manager, I wouldn't have that problem, right? And so, that was the discussion. However, when I went and I pulled data and looked at, incidences and violations and so forth on property managers versus non-property managers, I couldn't draw correlations. I couldn't draw correlations that one is better than the other. And so, and I'm quantitative in nature and statistics, and so it's hard for me to, kind of make an argument that if I can't prove it, it's not, maybe it's just in my head. I think it's more, there's some qualitative experiences that we've had that we just don't document real well to measure it. But so the intent here was to think about, lowering, well, what was happening is people would apply for a permit for up to 9. So if you have 9, well, nobody rents 9. They rent 8 or 10. But they do 9 because it circumvents the system. You don't have to have a property manager then, right? But the same argument can go for, for anything. So the proposal was to move it down to 7. Most of the calls that we get tend to be 8s and 10 occupancy. So if everybody had property managers that live an hour or farther away, all the problems would go away. The data didn't show that out. It may, and maybe if it played out, maybe it would. I don't know, but it didn't based on the data that we looked up and cross-reference and stuff. But something to think about in the future, and you guys may have some different thoughts on that. But all in all, we just couldn't come to we couldn't come to a data-driven conclusion on this particular item to require a lower amount for a property manager. I kind of have to admit that if it was a private industry, I probably would have made it 7 anyways, but it's not. So that's where we're at on there. So the VHR advisory board inclined not to be supportive of that change. That's what the red thing up there is.
Comments? I guess my take on it, does not doing anything leave the discretion up to the manager of the program to require a property manager?
Ernie Strelo, this is the question? Ernie Strelo for the record, yeah, it typically does. And so, there is language in the code right now that if there's any, that the director or designate has the power to make changes, to do things that make I don't know the exact wording, but to make the program run efficiently, right? And so we have done that with like cars. We've done, we could require, like if somebody loses a permit, I make them come back and tell me what they're going to do different if we give them a permit back, or are we just going to do the same thing? And so a lot of times I would require them to have a permit or noise monitor or, something that changes the behavior.
I just want to ensure, because I was present at the VHR board when they discussed this. And two of the members, well, one was laissez-faire, government interference, and the other was a VHR property person. And I understand both points of view. But I want to ensure that code enforcement and the sheriff's department is not, I want to make it easy on the county. And if we need to add language that says after an incident where the owner was non-responsive, the manager of the VHR program has the discretion to require a property manager. Let's add that language. I would support that. I think that's important to have in there, just to codify it, instead of leaving it up in the air kind of willy-nilly. I respect all the work that the board did, but let's take the air out from under it and just put the words in there. That's my feeling. Comments? Jim?
Actually, I'd like that. I would concur with that.
Dan?
It sounds like he's already got the authority to do that, but I think by underlining it as you suggest just makes it more clear.
Any other comments? Lori?
I support that. I was going to suggest lowering the number, but that's not necessary if we have a problem property and we can address it by requiring a property manager specifically for that problem property.
Paul?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that the suggestion is particularly cogent and right on target with respect to Ernie's commentary that he seeks prophylactic measures sometimes when a violation has come to him. And one of the measures that Ernie could impose is a property manager, for example. So I think it gives the department the flexibility that you seek without having it mandatory for all of the units, many of which have no violations whatsoever.
Kirk?
I think I'd like to hear AJ's comments.
Okay, AJ?
Thank you, Madam Chair. AJ Hames for the record. Just to provide a little context, I think the rationale that persuaded, we have our advisory board members here so they can speak on this as well, but I think the rationale that persuaded the board was mainly if you are an owner of a VHR and you are non-responsive, and then the director tells you you have to have now a property manager, might you as the owner actually have more incentive to respond quickly than this brand new property manager? So I think the rationale was if I'm an owner, I get in trouble once for non-responsiveness. I know my permit's on the line. I want to be that first responder, so to speak. I don't want to hire somebody new to come in and now be the watcher over my potential second violation, because once you get your second violation, you lose your permit. So I think there's a good rationale on either side. I'm not trying to persuade anybody, but just providing some context based on what I heard at those meetings.
I think that a great comment, but that also gives you more of a menu. The first time you now have this problem, if you get another, you're going to have a property manager imposed upon you. You see what I mean? The alternative is no permit. But I suppose I'm way too lenient, and just ask my son if that's the case.
Yeah, I do remember that conversation, and I respected that conversation. But I think depending on the owner, they may go, oh, just a warning, and because I've seen with some of the appeals, oh, just a warning, and then they come back, you fine them, and they go, oh. They mean business now. So I agree with Paul. The hammer is raised. And Ernie's not going to be here forever. And we need to have language in here for the next person that comes after you. I'm sorry, but we all are getting older. And the sunset comes for all of us. And we love you, but we know you've got bigger fish to fry at some point. But still, I do want to have, ducks lined up. And I think we should have language in there that gives the manager options. Bryce.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't disagree with you or my colleagues. The struggle I have is when these things become overly onerous. And, I think a 2-strike rule already, if you get the one warning, and if you're not, responsible enough to heed to it, then the second time you're done. I just think imposing additional regulations, which I'm for the most part opposed to in general, it just becomes more paperwork, more onerous. At the end of the day, this is a good concept, the VHR program. It's beneficial to the county. It's beneficial to the residents, and I just don't see where we need to add that. That's just my opinion.
And I agree, but on most of the incidents, it's not second time you're done. It's just second time, bigger fine.
If I may, Ernie Strela for the record. So to clarify, we don't do warnings. We do fines, right? We don't, our code is not written that way for this particular program. We do warnings for weeds and stuff like that, as you guys know. But the VHR program, there's very little warning out there. If it's substantiated, we fine them, and then they appeal. That's usually what happens. So that's what keeps us busy.
Well, it seems we have a majority who want to do something. Jim?
I believe that we need to give Ernie the flexibility of having that, because we know that there's going to be appeals, and these things can drag out, and I've sat through some of these appeals. I would like him to have that hammer that at least says, even if you win your appeal, this has happened, therefore we're going to require the property manager. So I'm in favor of doing this.
Kirk?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think if I heard AJ correctly, and I was trying to look through the ordinance as it exists, that am I correct, AJ? You're saying that the director or his designate does have the authority now. It's just not specifically enumerated. So I wanted to clarify that point.
AJ Hames for the record. I don't know if it says that specifically. There is a specific provision about how the director can has some discretion to impose requirements during the application process. And so it could be that during the renewal process, the director might be able to then say, last year you had a problem, this year you need a property manager. But I don't think currently there is a mechanism that would allow the director to impose it in sort of a penalty-like fashion. So if you wanted it to be a reactionary measure in response to this, you now have a property manager right now. I don't think that the code allows for that. I think you'd have to wait until the application came time to renew as it's currently written.
As a practical matter, I am also in favor of the proposal that has been articulated by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us. And one of the other reasons, as a practical matter, is what if you had a violation, then you threatened to pull a permit or pulled the permit, you have an appeal. If you have a violation, and then you imposed a property manager, and then there was an additional violation on this issue, what is the chance that the appeal is going to be successful with the process that's been articulated by some of us? I think very low. So it's a learning exercise. And yes, it seems lenient, I'll be the first to admit it, but as again, you ask my son, I'm kind of lenient until you cross the line.
I think we're getting into VHR board territory here. So there are 6 of us who said to add the language to give the director the right to use his discretion to impose a property manager. And I think it's, depending on the violation. And we can move on. Lori?
Yes, I just want to clarify that this would be in response to a violation, the first violation, not at a time when nothing seems to be going wrong and the person that follows Ernie after his departure doesn't come in and say, I just don't like you, or you have to hire a property manager. So as in response to a violation, that authority would be granted.
Next.
Could I clarify?
Sure, Dan.
The language in the text there makes it a requirement, kind of a regulation, whereas what I heard the discussion, we're wanting to give him the discretion to make that decision. Am I understanding the direction?
Yes, when it goes to the BOCC next month, he'll have the proper language.
Okay, but we're recommending, or the 6 that you
Discretion.
mentioned, are recommending that we give him the discretion of doing it. It doesn't mean that it absolutely has to happen, as it says here, to require property managers after an incident for non-responsive. We're
The
gonna give
proper
him
language. Our recommendation will go to the Board of
But our
Commissioners next month.
recommendation is to give him the discretion to do that,
Yes.
not the absolute authority that he must do it after every incident.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Next.
Ernie Strelo for the record. I get through this before the eloquence wears off. Apparently I'm going to die here. So this is local contacts. So there's 2 pieces of this, and so one of it was had to do a local contacts must report violations to the county, but they are not obligated to respond or speak with the complainant. So as it currently stands, if I'm a neighbor of Commissioner Bruno and he's renting his property out and he and I don't get along, or there's some sort of conflict, or I don't want to talk to him, whatever that is, he's too nice to me, I don't know. I can call in a complaint, call the sheriff. I don't have to call him, right? My name and number is on record, even if I call in anonymous to the county, and the sheriff will, I think, record it anonymously. But I don't have to talk to him. Now, with the proposal change, it is on the right side there, is that it was suggested by a VHR advisory board member to add language that they instead need to promptly respond to a complainant regarding any questions posed by a complainant. So I believe this to mean that if and the example was given is if Commissioner Bruno is clearing his walkway and the snow is blowing onto my walkway, and I call the VHR code hotline to complain about this problem, that Commissioner Bruno would need to call me back and talk to me about, what are you going to do to, whatever questions I have. Are you going to clean it up? Why are you spraying it on my driveway, on my walkway, whatever? This is a little history lesson. It's a good idea, and it probably works for most people. There is situations where we do get calls, non-VHRs, VHRs. Usually people call in on a neighbor on a VHR complaint. It's usually because they can't talk to those people, or if they call, some people call the sheriff directly, which they can do, right? And so I would argue in this particular one, just to think about, is that there are situations where individuals don't want their name given out, which they can have their name given out if it's a public record. And so it does come up that people want to keep their name hidden. They don't want to have to go call somebody, call the owner of the property, or call, or have somebody call them back. In fact, I have an appeal coming up where I have an audio recording about this very subject. And it didn't sound very good on the recording that we're going to listen to later this month. So just be cautious on this one. I understand the reasons for it, but it's not quite what it seems sometimes on these things. And then the second one is just the co-locating the emergency contact information. While it sounds kind of audacious that why would a rental person need to know the emergency contact for the rental they're renting, right? But there could be something that happens with the property while they're renting it, and they need to contact, I need help. Where's the fire extinguisher? Where's the where's the rule book on how, what I can and can't do. So there are reasons that you would post an emergency contact. So somebody rents the property, they need to be able to get a hold of somebody, So we don't have really a rule. We have a permit itself that talks to that we want it, close to the door. And we do that on purpose because when the sheriff comes, we have trained the sheriff to look for the permit when they knock on the door and the door opens. They ask for that and they look for that and they write it in their sheriff report to make sure the permit's hanging. This is another thing we want to make sure that we have by the door, perhaps with the code of conduct that we'll talk about in a minute, if you agree to that. So that's kind of what the number 3 is up there, is that it just kind of outlines it, conspicuous places, not the closet, inside the closet, under the bed, in a drawer. Believe it or not, that's people don't know what conspicuous means. So, that's where it ends up. So.
Questions, comments? Lori?
So as a person who has dealt with code enforcement a lot in the past, I strongly oppose the contact person responding to the complainant. I think that sets up some potentially very dangerous encounters unless that person is really trained in how to deal with confrontational situations. That can be very dangerous. So I would oppose number 2 strongly. I feel like, as you said, if there's a reason why someone's calling the sheriff's department or code enforcement about this, that person does not want to interact with the person solving the problem, and probably has a history of not interacting with those people, and probably has talked to the local contact in the past and it didn't go well. So I think for the safety of the local contact person and the local complainant, I would say that this is not a good idea. So that's my position on it.
Dan?
I would absolutely agree with that. But my question or my comment is on number 3, it would seem like that's valuable for a neighbor.
Yeah.
If somebody's walking by and they're noticing something they don't like, there's a number they can call. And I think that would be helpful. Yes, no? Thank you.
Ernie Strela, for the record, that's a question? You were asking me a question?
Well,
You said yes, no?
just as if you think for some reason it wouldn't be helpful for the public to know who the contact person was.
Well, they would, I mean, think about it. They would have to knock on the door and the renters would have to give them access to the contact information to, I don't know. What we do have is.
I'm sorry, I was assuming near the entrance meant outside. maybe by the door or in front of the house, but you're saying inside. Okay,
Well,
thank
for
you.
single-family homes, what we have done is we have magnets on bear boxes up there. And we have IR codes where you can scan the county website to report. If you're walking the dog, you see something, say something, right? Because the complaint I was getting a couple years ago is, we don't know how to get a hold of code enforcement, right? And so now you have a way, right? It's posted everywhere, right? So that was kind of the intended. Now, if you're in a multifamily house, I don't have a way to post on a mailbox that way, because all you have is the big trash bins, and that's probably where the thing is going to end up anyway. So from what Michael tells me, most of the magnets stay on the bear box. So does that answer your question?
Jim?
I think number 3 is just common sense. I think it makes total sense to have that inside by the entrance. And I have the same problem with number 2. Not everybody's a reasonable person to deal with. We've all at some point in our lives had neighbors who were with full-time renters who were a problem. So I don't think we need to kind of force that confrontation. So again, I have the same difficulty with number 2. I think number 3 is perfect common sense.
Paul?
I agree with the comments of my colleague. I don't think we should encourage confrontation, and I will tell you why. In Phase 1 of Tahoe Beach Club, Building 2, to give you an example without using names, it was a rental, and the rental said no dogs. And unfortunately, the federal government says if you call it a service animal, you will put that dog in with that individual who has rented the condominium, even if that person is insincere and there is no condition that the dog is improving for the individual. This particular dog was not a barker. This particular dog was a yapper, and it was a constant yapper. And the individuals around this rental called the individual directly. And it was an unfortunate confrontation circumstance of which I commend to you, it's anecdotal, but I saw it with my own eyes. I don't think it should happen again, and so I agree with my colleagues.
Kirk?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate my colleagues' comments, both for and against some of these ideas, the ones we've already gone through and these before us now. But I guess I'd prefer to sit on the fence until I hear public comment, and then we can try and build consensus on some of these items, because I would like to hear public comments, particularly if the advisory board members have reactions to some of the things that they are hearing us say, or rationales as to why they moved in one direction or the other. So I think I'll kind of withhold my comments on all the rest of the ones and this one as well until we hear public comment.
Same. Ernie? Next.
Ernie Strelo for the record, as we move on. Code of conduct. Well, so what does that mean? So code of conduct, AJ and I were having fun with this. When you Google it, it's really your rules and regulations, right? And so what I did is I put, when you walk into Harrah's or you walk into a restaurant, no shoes, no shirt, no service, that's a code of conduct, right? So when we went through and we were putting together the code of conduct, I put together a little sheet, and the VHR board did a nice job of putting in an order, and this is 2 pages, so there's a second page of this. So the black part of the code of conduct is already in the code, right? So we don't, unless you want to change something there, there's really nothing there. But the red is the suggested updates. Now, some of these updates, if you watch the County Board of Commissioners, you may recognize some of the comments in there that are in here from the commission that we added in here to have the VHR board take a look at and have you guys take a look at. There's a lot of discussion when I focus on number 3 and number 4, especially number 4, from the public, we had some individuals talk about smoke, odors, marijuana, so forth. One lady, as I recall, was a resident, complained that we can't control the resident smoking. How are you going to control the renters smoking? And then there were comments. There was thoughts that if people are going to smoke, they're going to smoke somewhere. And maybe you go out into the woods and they flick the cigarette butt and burn the forest down. So this is an interesting discussion. We don't, from a code enforcement complaint standpoint, I have gotten a complaint, I think over 4 years that I've been here, about smoking floating in a window. It's really hard to, as you can tell, I don't know where it originates. It's really hard to enforce those type of things, and you can come up with ways to do it, but it's a taxing proposition. So, but it's nevertheless up there. A lot of VHR renters. I don't know if some of you guys have your own VHR. Maybe you don't allow smoking in the premises, anyways. So it's a moot point, and that may be what you don't want. The disorderly, lewd, and indecent one above it is related to situations where a VHR, a renter, urinating off a deck, right in plain view of you that live next door to it. We have gotten complaints mostly from commissioners about lewd hats, people walking around with lewd hats and over by the lake. I guess you can come up with a lot of examples of what you consider indecent or indecent behavior, but there's a lot of questions, and I've also been sent a lot of video on this stuff. So then there's questions about, am I getting, is it legal to even videotape this type of stuff? Or is the person videotaping it violating something? So I don't know. It's an interesting thing. It might be okay to be on the code of conduct itself. Enforcing it, it can be enforced under certain circumstances, I guess, if you have enough data to prove it. And then the fifth one on here related to fire pits and stuff. The fire, surprisingly, I heard from residents that didn't even know some of the rules. So it's kind of interesting. It's probably pretty important to have the fire department requirements up there, especially when you have red flag warnings. I bet that you're not supposed to be running gas fire pits up there during a red flag warning. Who knew that, So it's important to know that. So the second page here is pretty much the same, except for the ones, as you can see on number 11, any other rules and regulations required by the director based upon the unique characteristics of a VHR or address complaints received. So, those would be something. And then the homeowner themselves can add additional things. So they can use this, they can add to it, not really subtract to it, but, we want to make sure that they're at least listing these type of items onto their code of conduct. We don't have a method right now where, I don't think there was an intent that we were going to go manage a code of conduct, like we were going to go read everybody's code of conduct, make sure it follows this. Much like we don't, we do to a limited degree on permits hanging on a wall. We send the permit, but that's about it, or if they come up with a welcome packet. But these are things for you guys to discuss. But this and I think the next one, or the one after that are the two bigger things, I think, on here. So I'll pass this on to the chair.
Kirk?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I'll reserve my comments on the specifics, but just a general inquiry for you, Ernie, or if the VHR Advisory Board people would care to make their comments in public comment. Would it be your intention to do a draft of a model code of conduct and give it to everybody for their use, or are we going to have 535 different codes of conduct all written by individual VHR owners?
Ernie Strela for the record. Oh, I didn't want to get into managing a code of conduct.
I don't blame you.
I think that, you know, my intent was to, we'll put it in the code in the, you know, like this. This is kind of the format that we would put it in the code and you follow it, right? And that would be the intent. I really don't want to police that. We can ask for a copy of it for our records, just like we ask for pictures of the inside, you know, but, you know, just remember that, you know, a lot of this stuff is, while it's in the code, I mean, where they put furniture, you know, that it's just not something that we spend a lot of time looking at. We look more at the, you know, the written documentations, the work with the HOA, because the major complaints we get are noise, parking, those type of things. So we want to make sure that we have those covered and we understand that they have everything documented, that the HOA is permitted the proper things for their VHR to exist, and that they signed the documents and that they went through the training. This here, my intent was that we put it in the code and they follow the code.
Jim?
Couple of questions. First, at least the basic code of conduct, is that required to be posted visibly inside?
Ernie Strela, for the record, yeah, it would be required to be on a wall
So
next to the permit.
it means it's not just the person that rented, but every guest can see it.
I'm sorry, can you,
So besides the person that's renting being the official renter of it, the other people can see it visibly. And a 3 and 4, I don't know how you do that.
What I would like to do is ask questions, not discuss the code of conduct. I'd like to get our questions out of the way, specific questions, then bring up the VHR board members to, if they would like to comment on the items that we have questions of them on how they came up with the items we have questions on, and then do public comment, and then we can discuss. Okay?
Okay,
Does that work?
yep.
Are there specific questions for staff?
Specific question, thank you,
Dan.
Chair.
Please.
Did you say that the use of wood-burning fire pits is always against the law at Tahoe? I forget. Is that correct?
Ernie Strela, for the record, I don't say that, the fire department does. I don't. This came from the fire department.
Oh, okay. That suggestion came from the fire department.
It wasn't a suggestion. That's the fire regulation.
Well, and then you answer my question. So the fire code says no wood-burning fire pits at Tahoe, basically. Or
Ernie Strela, for the record,
Douglas
as I
Tahoe.
understand
Okay.
it, that's.
All right, thank you.
yeah.
That helps that question. Is there a legal definition of obnoxious odors? And I guess we can ask this.
We'll get into that when we have our discussion.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
That was kind of
AJ.
a question, 'cause I don't know how you enforce that.
Yeah, AJ Hames for the record. So on this point, this is mostly verbatim from the code, except on number 4. So the advisory board had the same question, and they said, "What is an obnoxious odor?" And there was a long discussion. And so if you look at page 94 of your packet, that's the actual wording that they settled on. So they settled on, guests may not generate odors that neighbors would consider to be obnoxious. So I don't know that they loved that wording either, but that's where it ended up. So the onus is on the neighbor to decide what is obnoxious, which is probably not the wording I would recommend to include in code.
Thank you, AJ. So let's go through the last 2 pages. They're very short, and then bring up the members of the VHR board, and then public comment, and then we can have our discussion. Okay? Ernie?
Ernie Strela, for the record. So this one has to do with parking placards. So If you're familiar with the parking placards, so there's an 8.5 by 11 parking pass. It's each renter is required to put on their dash that rents a VHR property up in Tahoe. The VHR board looks like they considered and rejected a proposal to remove the requirements to take the placards requirement away from single-family renters. They would like to wait. They want data to, kind of understand if it makes sense to make further recommendations on changing that requirement. So they rejected that idea, but I'm not sure if you had any questions on that or not. Or agree. You can disagree. You can agree with him. It's okay. Okay. Okay, moving on. Okay, this just cleans up our code enforcement. So this is towards the back of the code. It's, if you've read it, it's a little hard to read. And so we're trying to, every time we do changes to the code, we try to fix it. Try to fix it incrementally. We're kind of cleaning a room at a time here when we're going through this. So this just structurally updates a little bit of the way the process works in section 050. So it's 20.622.050. That section is more organized into categories. Okay. Promise I'm almost done. And then this again, we just added on the clarification of fines. Believe it or not, there's concatenations of violators that we actually don't have specifically written into the code, so technically they can appeal. Even though we send them a fine and they don't appeal, we take a chance. So this, on number one, this kind of corrects one part of the fine section that talks about having a VHR permit, but the permit was revoked and they were illegally advertising still. And so some of the wording is omitted and we're just trying to clean it up. Number two is that fines may be assessed to the owner only, and this allows us to, the modification allows us to also and/or assess a fine on a property manager. Sometimes it's the property manager that's the problem, not the owner. And we just don't technically have that in the code written properly, so we're trying to fix that. Okay? No questions? Moving on.
One thing you did not mention,
And I will mention, I promise to mention it.
yes, page 97, 040, 13A. Renters must be personally present during each night that the VHR is occupied.
You beat me to it.
That's very, very important to me, and it should be important to everyone.
So the logic is, right now, the code is written in such a way where if you're taking financial responsibility for the rental and you're not physically there, that's okay. And so what the chair mentioned is, she says, hey, wait a second, how come they don't have to stay there the whole time also? Or they should be staying there the whole time. They're financially responsible. They're the renter. And that doesn't explicitly say that in the code. So good point. So AJ redlined it into the code. So for your discussion.
I've been married to a lawyer way too long.
Any discussion on that? Okay. And then lastly, so as you know, as we've been talking about, VHRs they're in Tahoe Township, and there's none in the valley as of today. And so there's been a desire for a while now to, limit the participation of the VHR advisory board members to people that have a residence in Tahoe, not in the valley, right? And so what it essentially would do, based from the current, right now we have 4 people in Tahoe and 1 down here in the valley here, East Fork. And then what it would change is that all 5 of those members would be in Tahoe. And then the the makeup of the 5 would be residents would be permit holders and 3 would not be permit holders. It also has been discussed that you can do either or. So, but this is what the VHR board talked about and defined and says this is how they'd like to see it. And then there's a definition of what a resident is, because Nevada has kind of interesting NRS related to what a resident is. They have different definitions based on different things, right? So if you're going to UNR, the residency requirements are different than if you're running for office or if you move here, you know. So what they're defining as a resident is a person that lives in the residential community. Now, it's an important designation because residential community where the VHR permits are allowed, there is not VHR permits allowed in some areas of the Tahoe resident area. So we talked previously about north of Cave Rock, in some of the neighborhoods like Cave Rock Cove and non-HOA parts of Glenbrook, they would be ineligible to be on this board, on the VHR board, according to the definition that they propose. So just want to make sure you understand what that means. Back to the chair.
Is that it?
Just to clarify, and thank you, Chair. Let's say you live in Gardnerville, you have a second home in Tahoe, and you have a permit at that second home in Tahoe. You would not qualify under this definition to be on the advisory board, correct?
Ernie Strelo, for the record, as they defined it, a resident. You'd have to be a resident in Tahoe.
Any other questions for staff? Lori?
Just looking at the red line code, it doesn't look like it says you have to be a resident of Tahoe and a current VHR permit holder. So we might want to clean that up. Oh, I see. When you're defining resident, then that says you have to live within that code. Okay, never mind. I did have a question, and then it went right out of my head, so when I think of it, I'll come back to it.
Okay, if there are no immediate questions, AJ.
Sorry, thank you, Madam Chair.
You have a
AJ Haynes
question.
for the record. I just, I know I made light of the obnoxious wording in the code. Not the obnoxious wording of the code, but the way that the code tries to define obnoxious, and it wasn't intended to be a knock at all on the advisory board. The advisory board was given the task of reviewing a number of recommendations from our Board of County Commissioners, and then also looking at other topics. And they were tasked with doing that in a very short amount of time. They were trying to finish by July, and I think they were given the directive to start that process in late May. So it was a very quick turnaround. There were many issues that were discussed that didn't make their way into this presentation, and I included didn't catch everything that I should have caught during those meetings. So that my comment earlier was not intended to be a knock on the advisory board, really more of just a knock on myself for not catching that. But they did an excellent job in the amount of time that they were given to be able to do a very thorough and very good review of the code.
Thank you, AJ. Keith, Mickey, please. And I do extend my greatest thanks to you for the marvelous job you did with the short amount of time you had.
Thank you. A couple of comments. First of all, this VHR advisory board, we have had a little bit of turnover, but 4 of us have been on this board for 3 years. We've sat through hour upon hour upon hour upon hour of public comment, as you can probably imagine. We've sat through appeal after appeal after appeal, and I believe we have a very good basis for the recommendations before you today. Some things for you to consider before you consider making changes. We spent quite a bit of time talking about the ability to require a manager. First and foremost, we could not see a correlation between professional management versus owner management and code violations. One thing you may need to consider is, by the way, currently we have 2 VHR permit holders. A third who was a VHR permit holder was put on the committee as a VHR permit holder but is no longer. So we have 2 who've never had a VHR permit, 3 who have. There was a very strong position that the ability to require a manager at a lower level isn't just perfunctory. It costs you 20% of your revenues. And so one comment could result in, if you make $200,000 a year running a VHR, $40,000 would be going to a manager. It also then takes the ability out of an owner. There were a lot of owners who said, I made a mistake. I was out. I wasn't answering my phone. Something was happening this time. And now all of a sudden they have to hire a manager who's now responsible for that second violation that could remove a couple $100,000 revenue from me. So it is a very significant issue to require a manager. And we believed as a group, it was not on lines about VHR permit holders or not, that we would not want to get in the position of requiring something. 2 violations, they can have their permit removed. That was sufficient incentive for them to be responsive. So that's how we got to that comment. On emergency contact, I know there was a reaction about, oh my goodness, we have to call disgruntled neighbors. And that's true. What we're trying to get to, and we heard from permit holders, they see that people are immediately turning to the sheriff and the county instead of handling neighbor by neighbor. Many of our emergency contacts are the people who own these VHRs. And they would much rather prefer their neighbors to call them to resolve an issue. However, the way the code's worded now, if I call the county, I'm going to get a response. If I call the sheriff, I'm going to see a response. If I call the emergency contact, I may or may not get a response. More likely than not, I will not. We thought requiring the emergency contact to respond to the complainant made sense because we want to encourage the communication to stay within the neighborhoods as a first pass. Now, I don't know about danger. This is a phone call. This is not going and knocking on their door. It could result in a negative conversation. There's a lot of negative conversations. By the way, you are not going to omit negative conversations by changing this one way or the other. There is a lot of emotion around VHR complaints. We thought, after a lot of deliberation, that having that emergency contact call that complainant and said, we've got your complaint, here's how we're responding, would be beneficial to the community, staying as a community, and not involving the county or the sheriff. Now, they don't have to. They can end a call. It doesn't say they have to stay on the call and be browbeaten. It doesn't say they have to give their home address. So we thought that was a significant change that would encourage those conversations to stay amongst neighbors. And again, the majority of the emergency contacts are neighbors, or they're people who know the neighbors. And we thought that was a very good situation. The code of conduct, noxious odors. It's the worst except for anything else. Do we want to go into which foods create noxious odors or not? Are cigars different than cigarettes? What came to us was that you were not allowed to consume marijuana. And we said that's not true. Marijuana is legal in the state of Nevada. And if you want to do gummies, if you want to do something that doesn't create an odor, that's your business. But when you are affecting your neighbors via noxious odors, there isn't the same, it goes back to hierarchy about what we're trying to do. We're trying to get these look like other houses in the neighborhood. And part of that ownership in that neighborhood is not continually irritating your neighbors. Paul's my neighbor, he's constantly irritated by me, but we get past that. But this noxious odor, they're different people every weekend, and that's why we put it in there. We would welcome any other definition of how to describe a noxious odor. If you had noxious odor at the determination of the renter, there are no noxious odors. So it's the worst of all except for everything else. Mickey, I guess that's all the comments I had. Like I said, this is based upon, I would say 25 or 30 hours of public comment over our 3 years. At least more than 10, where we are hearing, by the way, as much from the permit holder as we are the complainant. And this, in fact, I would say these are very pro VHR permit holders. We thought every one of these was in a position to benefit them. Again, what you had to, I think, that had the biggest response to was the emergency contact and complainant. And we believe that was very good at creating a neighborly feel. These things are being done. I know what's happening, rather than pushing it off, hoping it's good for the best. That's all I had, Mickey.
Thank you, Keith.
Mickey Hempler. We've been on this board close to 4 years now, and as Keith said, we have listened to hours and hours and hours of testimony. My feeling on a lot of these things where we rejected the ideas was because if it's not broken, let's not fix it. Let's not make changes to the code on a what-if basis. And I think that's why we didn't want to change. Well, the insurance thing has to do with insurance being a problem for people at the lake anyway. But there was a few rejections that we were brought these ideas. These weren't ideas we came up with. We weren't in a position to want to redo the code. We want to see how things flow, and things seem to be going fairly well. So that's kind of why we took kind of a stand on the side stance on this, because it's important that the code keep rolling along and we see how it goes, and we not make changes that really aren't necessary right now. Some of the changes and the noxious odors or whatever, it's just one more thing to give code enforcement another little nail in case they need it when they come up to a property where there's been a problem. But other than that, I think these were fairly benign changes. That's all.
Thank you, Mickey. I will now open public comment. Please sign the roster. State your name for the record.
Good afternoon, Ellie Waller. I participated the last 3 to 4 years, almost every event that was held, and when I wasn't there, I sent in written comment. I want to thank the 2 members here. I commend that advisory board. Please pass that message on for their due diligence. I support hefty fines, like the $20K mentioned in the background information. I think the heftiness of the fines sends the message that there are serious consequences when those fines are let. Just to go through some of the other things, I want to thank Ernie for all he's done, and that the final decision meeting will be in Tahoe. I think you'll have a better audience of Tahoe people, and I think that's important. I strongly urge that you allow the Advisory Planning Commission to further look at what was on their parking lot. That's what they call what they put for the next year's efforts after this is proven to work as it is. There's always the question that didn't come up today about VHRs in the valley. That is something in the parking lot that should be further discussed. Calling it a code of conduct is nebulous, in my opinion. It should be rules and regulations for renters, the 3 Rs. I think there would be confusion if you call it code of conduct. I just want to make sure it's understood. It's just a title, but I really think it needs to resonate with the renter as well as the owner. What else did I have in here? I didn't want to go too far into any more discussion, because I think you guys all have seen this before. This is just another round, but we do need to let it stand the test of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie.
Dan Ainsworth. I just have 4 things I want to comment on. On page 93, I agree that the local contact person must also promptly respond to a complainant. Should not be put in there. I agree with the comments from the majority of the commission here. On page 94, as Keith so eloquently talked about odors, I think the item little Roman numeral 4 there is a real tough one. I think you're going to have some pretty good conversation on that. I think you can really go down a rabbit hole on that. I'm okay with 3. That's probably state law anyway, but I think it's okay to have that in there. On page 97, Madam Chair, you're not going to like this comment, but I think renters must personally be present during each night is an issue. It certainly would be an issue in Glenbrook, for instance, where they can only rent owner to owner. And if an owner rents another home to have a wedding in the local area there, he's certainly not going to move from his house to the house he just rented to have some guests come into town. So I think that needs discussion too. I'm not quite sure why you're so adamant about that, but I'll just leave my comment there. And then on page 102, I do have an issue with the definition of a resident. I think you're going to be missing out on a number of good people if you require that they live in a community that does allow VHRs. I'm not quite sure the background for this one. It might be to eliminate possibility of people from the valley. If that's the background reason, that's probably a bad reason too. So I would recommend that you not make that particular change. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Anyone else? Seeing no one rise, I will close public comment. Do you want to answer any of his questions? I will answer the one on renters being present on numbers, page 97. The reason that I brought this forward is because of bait and switch, that someone can rent a unit for someone else. Just like parents rent hotel rooms for their teenage children. And that is an issue. So I thought that it was important that we had language that someone with a credit card can't rent a room for their young children, teenage children, high school children, or an out-of-town guest. And AJ explained very well to the board that the definition of renter and definition of guest are two different things. Correct, AJ? And that needed to be clarified in the ordinance. Ernie, do you want to tackle any of the others? AJ, the definition of resident in the VHR advisory board changes?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. AJ Hames for the record. Yeah, there's no specific definitions for renter or guest, but those terms are not used interchangeably throughout the code. Generally, renter means the person who actually rented the property, and guest means just the guest. So the person who paid is the renter, everyone else is a guest. The renter, for example, has to be 25 years or old, but 25 years old or older, but guests can be any age, for example. And then on the definition of obnoxious, I think it would be fine to keep the word obnoxious in there, but the standard that you would typically see in that type of a situation would be a reasonable person standard. So the law sort of implies a reasonable person standard in the absence of an express standard. And so if you just had the wording as it's written on the slides, that might be legally more defensible than adopting a more subjective standard, which is the neighbor's own interpretation of what is obnoxious. So if you were to go with the slide language, it would be easier to enforce legally.
Bryce.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the advisory board for all your work. You know, the nice thing is you guys do all the legwork and then it's presented to us, and the last thing I'm going to do is go through here and butcher a bunch of language. when you've done all the legwork. Just a couple points, Madam Chair, with respect to the page 97 changes, I guess I just want clarification. So if I rent a VHR, and so I'm the renter, and I have my family up there with me who are the guests, and I rent that for 7 days up at the lake, and I have some friends down in the valley that I want to go visit, and I choose to spend the evening with them down in the valley, then technically I'm not present at the VHR, which under this would prohibit that. Is that correct?
No, the issue is if you rent the VHR and you rent it in name only, it's to prohibit that for you renting it for someone else. So it's to prohibit people from doing a bait and switch. I'm renting it for someone else, so you're only carrying the financial responsibility and you have no control over what's going on in there. It's to prohibit that. If you go down and visit your friends down in the valley, it doesn't prohibit you from doing that. Nobody's in the VHR.
Well, in that particular case, the guest would be in the VHR, but just, if I could for a moment, just take it at.
And we
at
can
your
have AJ answer that question.
From your clarification, I guess, when we talk about the financially responsible party, again, I think we're just getting overly onerous and litigious here. I think if I rent the VHR and somebody, first of all, and somebody else stays there, that's against the code. Is that correct? And I'm not there.
No, AJ Ames for the record.
Okay, so today, currently, that's not prohibited. I can rent it and somebody else can stay there.
Right.
However, I'm still financially responsible, as is the homeowner. Correct?
Ernie Strela for the record, yes.
So then I guess I'm concerned as to why the Planning Commission in Douglas County is trying to regulate that when the homeowner and the person who's financially responsible as the renter are ultimately responsible for whatever happens at that rental property. So I'll leave it at that. What was my other thought? Going back to the property manager issue, my position hasn't changed on that. As a matter of fact, it was even further validated by the comments regarding just the cost. I think you issue a violation. That there's reasons, probably good reasons why maybe that first one wasn't dealt with, and that particular homeowner will pay the price for that. And 2 strikes, you're out, potentially not, but that's how it's written today. And I don't think that we need to add, again, we can give the discretion. I get that. That's just a pathway for the director to do that. And I guess in concept, I'm not opposed to that. I'm just opposed to, I guess I'm just opposed to it altogether. I think those are my only 2 comments for now.
Kirk?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple of introductory comments, and then I want to comment on 5 of the specific areas that we're dealing with. First of all, I agree with Bryce. I want to thank Dr. Strelo and Deputy DA Hames for their excellent work in putting this package together, and also, Ernie, you have an excellent team behind you doing all the enforcement, and that makes the job a lot easier, so I appreciate that. And I also want to thank Chair Byer and Member Hempler and the rest of the VHR Advisory Board for their efforts. They've done a lot of work on this, and I think I'm in agreement with almost everything that they have done, so I appreciate your good efforts. The areas I want to comment on are 1, insurance. I do agree with the VHR Advisory Board that there shouldn't be any changes there. Number 2, the 8-night minimum. I think that's problematic in my mind because you can have a straw renter. If you would like to have a permit and you want to pay for 8 nights of rental, you can just say, my brother is renting it and not really rent it. I prefer to just have some flexible language in there that just says, if the director finds that there is a abuse of occupying a permit for the purpose of blocking other people, that they can revoke the permit. That would be my preference there. Number 3, on the comment that Bryce just made, requiring a property manager after a problem occurs. I again agree with the VHR advisory board. I think, Keith, your comments were right on point. It's not the kind of thing that we want to put a heavy hand on. Again, discretion would be the solution I would have there. The third one, the code of conduct, I think that's very problematic. I think we're just running a risk of the county being the moral judger of what is going on, and I don't think that's a wise course of action at all. I think Ellie made a very good point. Maybe we just ought to rename it Rules and Regulations for Renters or something like that would be a little more acceptable to me, and I don't think we need to rewrite everything. I do have specific problems on the 2 points that were mentioned about behavior and odors. I think those are just not what I would like to see in county code. And then the last one on the composition of the VHR advisory board, again, I agree with Mr. Ainsworth. I think there's valid reason to allow a member of the VHR advisory board to not be in an area where properties are rented, whether that's the valley or whether that's the other properties north of Cave Rock. There's no reason to block them from being on the VHR advisory board if they have something to offer. That's up to the board to determine whether they have something to offer. And then I also think the language that we have, not just the red line language in that section, is very confusing, and I have some language that I could offer at the appropriate time. We talk about people being registered voters. I don't think it's necessary to have to require you to be a registered voter to be on the VHR advisory board. And I think the residency language could be cleaned up a little bit. Right now it says you have to physically reside at the residence for 6 months during a calendar year. Well, if you move from one location to another location, that would disqualify you if you're not at the residence for 6 months. So I think there's some problems there that we could work out. But those are my thoughts, and I appreciate the rest of the members of the Planning Commission, the points that they take, even though we may disagree. Thank you.
Kirk, what about the responding to a complainant?
I would tend to think that's not something we want to put in there, but I'm not that strongly.
Paul?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Preliminarily, Chair Byer and Member Hempler, I know what kind of work that it took, as I've attended a couple of your meetings, and I was kind of glad you were on the committee and I was not. I would also say that, and thank you for your service. Director Dallaire and Ernie Strablow, Dr. Strablow, you two both have tremendous staffs that put together a program that is, in my opinion, probably one of the best balancing all of the interests of those that want to deny VHR completely. And I'll admit, when I first heard of the concept, I was kind of there, to a concept that can generate revenue for the county and for homeowners that really does not violate the guiding principles of changing a neighborhood. And all of these regulations we're talking about, this room would have been full should it be any different. And for that, I have to say not only thank you, but I'm very, very impressed. I did not forget our district attorney in going through all of our changes, all of our creative ideas when we were coming up with the ordinance originally. I thought that the help has been substantial. But through the years, it's proven that strict enforcement, the issuance, the removal of the permits when necessary, has provided a good revenue source for the county, I hope, and indeed for the homeowners, and has not degraded the neighborhoods. I have not seen the evidence of a neighborhood that has been degraded with respect to the presence or absence of VHRs. Now, we're down below the number of 600. That helps. We're also with restrictions on 15%. I know that helps, particularly with condominium developments. But all of the factors stated together make this a program that I think the county should keep for years to come. It's really beneficial. Now, on the particular issues, there may be on the renter being present and not present. I understand what the chair has been talking about. I understand Bryce's, why do we want to create this more difficult circumstance and create more laws or litigious. By the way, I made my life's bread and my career out of being litigious, but that's another subject. But I listened to everyone, to Mr. Ainsworth's comments, Mr. Strablow's comments. There may be a compromise where certain, and I'm just suggesting this, I have no idea of how the language would go, that you make certain exemptions. Glenbrook, I think Mr. Ainsworth brought up a substantially valid point that you can't have the renter in there when you are renting out the house, particularly for an event. There's an instance at Tahoe Beach Club. There's the Beach Club Suite, which is rented for days or a week, and you have to have a sponsor who is a owner of property within Tahoe Beach Club by TRPA declaration. And I tell you, I've sponsored like many individuals, and I swear to you, I don't want to be in there sleeping with them. But so there has to be exceptions, I think, to a hard and fast rule there. Second issue was the professional manager. I think leaving the discretion to Mr. Strablow or his successor or her, who may come into Mr. Strablow's position, and the staff really need that discretion. They've proven time and time again, exercising discretion in that department has proven to be really well done. It's not arbitrary, it's not capricious. I think that that is the solution with respect to the violation. I realize and I'm mindful of the dollars that Mr. Byer has suggested that the owner loses, but that's only for the calendar year. As I envision it, that property manager doesn't last off into the future when the permit's renewed. But that was just my thinking, and I hope I'm not wrong on that. The contact. I have to say that I don't want the renter, the violating renter, contacted directly. Just because of personal experience. I know it's anecdotal. The yapping dog, the two renters, the two residents that were around that rented unit, but it wasn't pretty. And I think encouraging confrontation of that sort, even though, and I listened intently to Mr. Byer's commentary, but I just can't countenance that. They almost came to blows. And I don't think that's necessary in a community. As a matter of fact, that's the antithesis of creating a community. Those comments, did you want me to comment on anything further? I think those are the most substantive comments I have, Madam Chair. Do you know, code of conduct, if we call it a code of conduct, and I can't envision how the enforcement of that will be. All of the enforcement aspects of our current code have a pretty good path, and they have been, as I've just complimented the department, good consequences that fit the violations. These I mean, I think they're great to look at and that people should follow, but I have trouble with the enforceability and whether we're casting another set of rules that are outside the ordinance. Some without definition, some with good definition. Is it a good idea? Do you know, it is a good idea and perhaps it should be published, but I don't think as a requirement that will have specific consequences upon violation. Thank you.
Lori.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also really want to compliment the Vacation Home Advisory Board, or Vacation Rental Advisory Board, please, and the staff. Your efforts are clear in how this ordinance has evolved. Looking through that list, the 5-page list of the meetings that have been conducted to discuss this ordinance, that's impressive. I don't think I've worked on anything in my entire career that took 5 pages of meetings. So please accept my gratitude for all the work that you've put in. I do think our ordinance is a living document. I think it is evolving as we move forward with everything. We see how things are working and what's not. I think a lot of the components of this ordinance are to respond to things that maybe weren't quite as clear as we'd like, or as maybe we hadn't thought of when we started off here. So just going through, I don't see how changing the insurance at this time is going to affect our ability to sustain this ordinance. So I would entirely go with the recommendations of the Vacation Home Rental Advisory Board. I think, as some of my other colleagues have stated, that the 8 nights per year of rental may be a little bit arbitrary. I think I really like the idea that of the added statement that the director, if that's determined that this permit was not intended to be a real permit, it is a ghost permit, and it's impeding real property owners from renting to renters and also generating that revenue that is important to the county. I think that's a problem. And if the director has the authority to revoke that permit, I think that that's really important. The 8 nights, maybe it's 8, maybe it's 1, maybe it's 2, maybe it's 27. I don't know. But I think that number, if that number was gone entirely, I don't think it would change the result of this. Because if there is an understanding that this is not a real permit, then that permit can be revoked. I think the licensed property manager issue for the Tier 2 units, I don't want to make it a mandate. I don't think that it should automatically kick in at a certain level. But I think it is just another tool in our toolbox for property owners that we're going to be at a point, maybe now, maybe in a few years, where property owners that have been revoked are now reconsidered, and now they're also maybe not as responsive as we'd like. And so that's a tool that we can place on them to put them back in the system. So I would have it as an optional requirement that the director can impose mid-permit for properties that are experiencing difficulties. Sorry, property manager, if you're going to lose some revenue for it, but you have put yourself in a position where your unresponsiveness has caused us to have some issues. So this is the result of that, if the director feels that would be appropriate. Again, I want to reiterate my concerns about requiring the complainant and the local contact person to interact. I don't believe there's anything that would not allow them to do that. I think that certainly is something that can occur. My experience in code enforcement is that if you have a complainant, and it's something that is occurring near them or next door to them or across the street from them, they are going to be a serial complainant. So every time there's a noise issue, they're the ones that are going to call. It's not going to be the random residents in the neighborhood. That complainant is going to be the complainant. So you're setting up that local contact person to always contact that complainant, which will, after a while, not result in that happy correspondence that we're hoping for from a neighbor-to-neighbor standpoint. To me, it's not a good idea. If that local contact person chooses to do that or is encouraged to do that, I don't have any problem with it. But I think the requirement that that contact be made on every single complaint, I think that's not a reasonable requirement. Placing the contact information at the entrance of the VHR, absolutely, it should be right there. Let's see. The code of conduct. I have some issues with the code of conduct. So the code of conduct basically says that the renters may be subject to fines. So I'm assuming the county would be fining the renters, not the property owner. But we're kind of blending our code of conduct with the property owner's code of conduct, which makes it potentially seem like we are going to fine the property or the renter for non-county code items. I don't like it as a code of conduct. I think rules and regulations on the renters would be a better way to handle it. I think having a code of conduct is really good, and I think even though it is very difficult to enforce and to describe, to explain some of these, I think that having some prohibitions or something in there that talks about some of these problems that we've had, the marijuana smoke, the lewd behavior, I think that just helps remind people that to be responsible. And I also think that the renter, if they think that they're the ones that are going to be on the hook for their boyfriend peeing over the rail, that might deter that behavior. It is going to be very difficult to enforce, and I get that. But I think having it out there might deter some of it. Let's see. But again, I just don't see how we can meld the two, the private code of conduct and the county's minimum code of conduct. So I think that needs a little more tweaking. I agree that maybe some of the way the language is written for the resident being on, or renter being on site, I get that we need to have something in there, but I think the Glenbrook example is one that we need to maybe find a workaround. And then there could be exigent circumstances where that renter has to leave for a day or two. I think it needs to have a little bit of flexibility in there. So with that, I just want to thank you again for the really excellent work that you guys have done to try to address these very difficult issues. I think it's a lot, and I think you've put in a lot of time and a lot of good thought on it. So thank you for that.
Dan?
Wow, what a piece of work. This is great. And again, to reiterate, the congratulations to the advisory board and the hard work you've done. And that really sort of opens me up to remind me that I believe that the people who are closest to the issue are the ones that know what to do with it. And I would state, based on that I'm going to go along with the advisory board's recommendations. So as we blitz through them, I think you've covered a lot of things. I think you've looked at it long and hard. You're the ones who've taken the 10 to 20 to 30 hours of public comment, so I'm going to defer to your judgment on that. The eight night minimum, you picked 8 nights. I'm good with it. I think there's a reason that staff needs that. And quite frankly, for the scenario where the owner's going to rent it from himself for 8 nights to qualify for it, county still gets the transit and occupancy tax. So, it's a win-win, right? I'm going to change my earlier comments about the property manager and defer to your judgment on that. I think staff has adequate discretion now if it really gets out of hand, particularly at the point where permits are being renewed or requested to be renewed. You know, the local contacts, I think, is important. I would, okay, the promptly respond to, I don't know how that would be enforced. And my fear is the item number 2, requiring the local contact to then promptly respond to complainant. I will defer to your judgment on that. It kind of goes against some of my grain in terms of the comments made by my colleague to my left here. But again, you're closer to it. I can see your argument. I don't know how it'll be enforced, but certainly anytime you can resolve an issue at the lowest level, and I agree with you that most local contact people want to resolve it at the lowest level. And so I'm going to defer to your recommendation, even though I said something different earlier. I don't really have a problem with the code of conduct per se. I like the comment about cigar smoke. So if you're going to say marijuana smoke, you should say cigar smoke too, because I don't like that. I would say if we're going to leave that in there, that the suggestion by the DA on how you define obnoxious odors, the reasonable person judgment argument, not the neighbor's argument, and I think that would be fine. I might just beef up your item 12 where you say renters may be subject to fines. I think that's fine. But I think renters and property owners may be subject to fines. It's a minor point. But I don't have a problem with that, and I recognize it's going to be hard to enforce, but I personally would rather read a code of conduct when I go into a place rather than rules and responsibilities or whatever. It's the same thing in my mind. And I think it's good, as somebody mentioned before, just to remind the renters that, hey, you know, behave, fit into the neighborhood. I think I've hit everything, haven't I? Did I miss something? The renter on site. We've been given 2 scenarios this afternoon where the current wording on the renter on site really doesn't fit. The one presented by the chair, I think, is a valid one. I asked the question about that owner-to-owner rental within the Glenbrook area. It seemed unusual to me when I learned about the program. But you make a good point. I mean, how do you do that when you got your house here, you're renting another house for your family to come in for an event, and you can't be in 2 places at one time. And to Bryce's scenario, of course, Bryce, I would say if I'm going to spend the money to rent a place in Tahoe for a week, I'm going to be there. But I was thinking the same thing, where it would be very easy to get called out on business, emergencies. I mean, lots of scenarios you can imagine where that renter is going to be off-site. I certainly understand the chair's concern. Maybe there's some language that fits all these scenarios and works. But again, that's my comment on that. But thank you very much for the opportunity, Chair.
Thank you, Dan. Great comments. Jim?
I also want to thank the work of the advisory board and appreciate 2 of them actually coming today. And Ernie, you're not getting old. It's okay. You'll be around. I kind of scribbled all over this paper, so I'm kind of going to go all over the place. I think what the chair had talked about in terms of the renter being present, I think what you have to avoid is my little brother is 20 and I'm 25 and he needs me to rent it, but he's not going. Me and my friends are going to have a party. And I'm not ever going to be there, but I rented it for him. And I think that's what we have to find. And as people mentioned, exceptions like Glenbrook, I'm not an attorney and I'm not ready to for the language. I don't know what the language should be. I think the point is that you will have people just like you have your older brother go buy beer for you. It's the same thing. We all did it. Well, maybe not all, I shouldn't say. But so I think we have a reasonable requirement that we want the renter to be the person that's coming up. And of course, it might be when somebody comes by, he might be down the street at a party. So we can't expect the renter to be there the whole time. We can understand why he might get called away on business or whatever reason. But I think what we want to do is find language that prevents somebody who's not planning on coming up from renting that property for somebody else. I think that's a worthwhile goal for that. The requiring the property manager, I think I like that discretion for the director to have. It's not something I think they're just going to willingly, hey, I don't like this guy, let's do this. It's something that we resolve a problem, should a problem arise. I like him having that power. The 8-night minimum, I'll go with the discretion of the advisory board. I get the purpose of it. That sounds right. The code of conduct. When this was discussed, we said noxious, but this says obnoxious. Obnoxious is kind of hard to define. Noxious is harmful, poisonous, or very unpleasant. I think, and I'm not sure how you enforce this anyway, but I would change that to noxious if it were me. I think that more defines what we're talking about. It's unpleasant. We could be something we're not even thinking of here, as an example. I think that definition would cover what we're trying to do here. So that's a suggestion anyway, that we just make it noxious. Kind of fits the definition. Disorderly, lewd, or indecent behavior. I think we know what that means, but it's kind of hard to pin it down, what somebody thinks it is and what somebody else thinks it is. So it's kind of hard for somebody to come up and say, oh, you were disorderly. Well, I'm on vacation. So I don't know quite, and I can't even think of better language for that. I just think that that's going to be a hard one. And the fire pit should have always been there, in my opinion. So I'm glad to see that. So again, I think that's what I have. I just, again, thank the work of the board. And, and sometimes when we look at this stuff and we wonder about something, but we realize you guys have been there and you've been through this and you have the examples. And so I really respect what you presented today. Thank you very much.
My turn. I'm very quick. And the VHR board knows how much I respect them, each and every one, even though we don't always agree. I admire you for your dedication and all that you've put up with from the public, from the board, from me, from the politics and the emotion. It's phenomenal. And you will always have my respect. Never, ever forget that. And I think this board has also agreed with that. It's beyond words. And what we have in front of us, you spent, 24 hours, it seems, back to back, doing this, going through this, and your conversations and your discussions and your debates. There was a lot of emotion, argument, and listening to the public. It was quite interesting, sometimes entertaining, sometimes frustrating, but you made it through. And your recommendations, most of them I agree with. They were very, very thoughtful. And I think the Board of Commissioners will agree that you put so much thought. There's very little to disagree with. The only things that I have to say is, yes, I do want to give the director discretion on program managers or property managers. I like that you came up with the 8 nights. I think that's a wonderful balance. It's enough to make people serious about holding a permit, but it's not overbearing. It's just enough. Nice number. The code of conduct, I don't like number 4. I thought the discussion that you had over that, it was very good. And I must say that the discussion over marijuana was very interesting between vaping and edibles and all that whole discussion. And then when cigars came up, I had to chuckle because that was an excellent point. Well, I like smoking a cigar. My wife doesn't like them. What am I going to do? And then when the person from the public got up and said, I don't like marijuana, what if the neighbor is smoking marijuana cigarette? Who do I complain to? That's an excellent point. So we can enforce that, and it's legal. So I really don't think that we're going to be able to enforce that. I think that's up to the owner of the property. Obnoxious odors could be incense or a diesel engine. Somebody's idling in the driveway, waiting for people to bring their baggage out. You know, I don't know. I think that this one, number 4, was insisted on by someone who is thinking politics more than anything else. Number 3, again, a lot of that is already in code. Disorderly, lewd, or indecent behavior. That's already against the law. So are we just reminding renters to behave appropriately, to act your age? And I like when AJ brought out that what he's done in this code of conduct is take all the things that were scattered throughout the ordinance and is just placing them in one place, and they're going to be put in the code of conduct instead of having them in the permit, having them in the ordinance, having them here, and there. They'll be in one place, posted in the unit for the renters. But I think we should get rid of number 4 altogether. That's just my opinion. And responding to the complainant, majority says no. I don't like confrontation. It's not something I would like, but I'm going to leave that up to the Board of Commissioners. Because I respect what the board is saying, that we want to encourage the owners to talk to the residents in the neighborhood. I respect what Lori is saying, that it can get ugly. So I'm just going to leave it up to the Board of Commissioners to decide. And same with the composition of the VHR board. And that's pretty much all I have to say. Ernie? Sure.
I just had a clarifying question. Coming back to the renter's presence, I guess one of the struggles that I have with this is that this isn't part of the presentation. So I'm curious if this has been vetted by the advisory board, if there's been discussion, if there's been public input, et cetera. Because I hear what Jim is saying about, I rent the property for my 20-year-old brother so he can throw a party. Bad, right? Although, I don't know, maybe I rented it and threw a party too. I mean, I like to party. But I'd like to think about it in another instance where I want to rent it for my son and his wife and children, and they can't afford to rent a place in Tahoe, which we've done a number of other times in other VHRs. And we rent that for them. They're incredibly responsible, but they can't afford to do that or what have you. There's a contract with the homeowner in terms of what you can and can't do. I'm on the hook for whatever they do financially. The the VHR permit holders on the hook for whatever they do. And I just I don't see where it's the place of the county and the purview of this body to be dictating how that should be done. And so I have just a general concern with it in the sense that this was not part of the presentation. It wasn't brought up by the advisory board. I don't know where you see it. I don't know where you all see it. I don't know what public input there's been on this. But I think there could be unintended consequences of this that have not been fully vetted, nor am I aware of, I don't even know if the public is aware of this being a potential item that we were going to discuss here today. So I would just like the board's input, because I respect the board and everything that's been put forth here and all that, and the fact that they haven't had an opportunity to weigh in on this is probably my biggest concern. So it sounds like, just by the shake of your head, Ernie, that this has not been vetted by the board.
Good afternoon, Ernie Strelo for the record. It was brought up, and the chair of this committee was present at a VHR meeting. I think it was our last one, right? July 22nd, and it was brought up in public comment, or in this, I believe, at the beginning of the meeting. And the VHR board did discuss it as part of towards the end of the process of going through the other prescribed things that were already on the meeting agenda. I can't speak for really what they were feeling or thinking. I think I can speak for myself. I mean, it hadn't been an issue in the past, where this issue particular came up, but I did note it was a good point that, maybe it should be in the code. I hadn't thought much about it. That was my personal first thinking. I hadn't thought it through like, you guys, I didn't sit like this and talk about it. AJ can speak for himself, and you have a couple board members here that can probably talk to what they were thinking. But they did talk about it. I don't believe there was a lot of discussion on it. It was in our final meeting.
I mean, look, I don't want to delay this any longer, and I'll defer to my colleagues on whether they want to hear anything about it or not. But it just seems to me that there's a presentation that addresses a number of points here today. This is not one of them. So I don't know what the discussions are, and it's something that we're going to make. We're being asked to make a decision, respectfully, by the chair today on whether to include that or not include that. And I just feel like, without your input and that of the stakeholders, I just feel like this is not the appropriate time to do that unless there's a compelling reason why we should.
AJ?
AJ Hames for the record. I can say, just as far as the presentation goes, well, first of all, I'll start with the noticing. So the noticing in general for the ordinance, I think, is sufficient to include a discussion of this topic, because the ordinance encompasses all changes to Chapter 622 of Title 20, including, and then it lists a number, and this is not on the list. It's also not in the presentation, but it is in the ordinance, and it's on page 97 of that ordinance, so it's included within those changes, or excuse me, page 97 of the packet. I think going forward to the board, we'll probably make it a point of presentation as well, but not every single change. Changes that Ernie and I deem to be minor, clerical, for example, those are included in the ordinance, but not in the presentation because they didn't warrant discussion. This obviously did, and I think it was just oversight on our part to not add it as another discussion item, but it's certainly reasonable to discuss it. As far as the board, they did discuss it. I agree. I don't remember that the conversation was long. I don't think it was I don't think a lot of thought was put into it. I think the idea was presented and everyone seemed fine with it, but there wasn't a big discussion. That's my recollection.
Well, like I said, I'll defer to my colleagues if they want to hear more about it. Otherwise, I'll state my position at the vote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did remember my question. The change to the board composition, I'm curious whether that change would occur immediately upon the implementation of the ordinance, or if that would occur as the VHR advisory board member, their terms are up. I don't know what the current composition is, but I would certainly hate to lose people who have worked so diligently on that board within the next 6 months or so.
Yeah, AJ Hames again for the record. The appointments have already been made and they were lawful when they were made, so there's nothing in the new ordinance that would undo any of those appointments. They would be, there is one board member who is a Valley resident, which is our current requirement, so she would be ineligible to renew, but she would continue to serve out her term because her appointment was valid.
Any other comments? Do you need anything from us? Or do you just collect our comments and you will come up with a sheet similar to what the VHR board recommendation sheet is?
Ernie Strelo for the record. I think AJ and I were making notes. It's however you want to do it. The VHR board, they kind of did what you did. They went through the process, and at the end, they did have a vote to affirm, one way or the other, where they were going with all the discussion that they had based on what you guys were talking about. A little bit more people here, so, and everybody has opinions. But I did put some notes in here. I think you did too. AJ did too. So it's up to you.
AJ, tell us what to do.
Madam Chair, my suggestion would be that on maybe some of the more contentious, I guess that's not exactly the right word, but on the items where there was disagreement or possible disagreement with the advisory board, maybe it would be helpful to do a vote just to see if there is some kind of consensus. If there isn't a consensus, then we probably would not present that to the board. So it would be helpful to know if there is a consensus on those items where you might disagree with the advisory board.
Okay. It's a good thing I made some notes.
Madam Chair, I know you were making a lot of notes, and I was trying to too. I have an alternative proposal, AJ. We could certainly do that, but I think some of them maybe even nuanced, where we might find 3 people on one side, 2 people on another side, and 2 other people on another side. My alternative suggestion would be just that we follow the recommended motion, and then that we say that each planning commission member should submit their individual recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners. That way we would avoid having you to speak for us in tabulating comments and providing them in a fashion that the board would find useful. But I'm open to the idea that AJ has. If we want to go through the 4 or 5 items and say up, down, yes, no alternatives, we could do that. I'm not sure we're going to get to a resolution on if we do that, but that's an option.
Paul?
There are 2 options that were just discussed. One is going through all of those matters that did not have agreement with respect to the VHR Advisory Board. The second, by my colleague to the left, was that we each come up with our list and our positions on the various matters. And the third that we should consider is just leaving it with Ernie and his forces to discern what has been discussed and where there were areas of substantial disagreement. The reason why I say that is because if I were a board member, I just want to know what people disagreed about and why. And I don't care about the rest. I mean, I do care, and I don't mean to make a light of it, but I don't think I need it regurgitated to me or in front of me. So that would be the third alternative I'd suggest, and I know that's putting a burden on you, sir, and your staff, but I think you have the record to look at as well.
I would like that better. There were only 2 items where we had a majority voting no. And that would be responding to the complainant and the code of conduct. And the rest we went, and then the discretion, we voted against or the majority went against the VHR board. So it may be a little unclear. Is our next Planning Commission meeting before October 16th? I believe it is. Would it be appropriate to continue this until the next Planning Commission meeting, and then we could vote on it then when we have the tally, the official tally? Could we do that?
Madam Chair, it's your item. The first reading is going forward in 2 weeks to the board, and I suspect that if the board, they can request changes to the ordinance between the first and the second reading, and so long as the changes are not so great that we have to redefine the ordinance, we can continue with the second reading. If they make significant changes, we'll have to probably redo the first reading. But if there are changes that this board wants to see made, my recommendation is to present them to the board in the first reading, so that if they're minor in nature, they can still proceed with the schedule. So if you want to do a tally today so that we can present those differences of opinion to the board at the first reading, I think that would be the most productive.
Okay, then let's just go ahead and vote. And let's go, on the ones that we are most contentious, so to speak. And then do the recommended motion on the others. So far as giving the director discretion to require a property manager when a property owner is non-responsive. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, if I could just for a second.
Yes.
Are we taking these individually? I know there was comments about insurance and those type of things. Are we taking each of these, or and feel free as the chair, I mean, do as you may, but are you just picking the ones that?
Right now, I have a list of the 4 that we were in disagreement on. The other ones, we had discussion, but we were still in agreement with the VHR board.
So anything that we don't discuss, excuse me, anything we don't discuss is basically that we're proceeding with the recommendation of the advisory board?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, if I could just make one clarification. Right now, we're just taking a tally of opinions. This is not a formal motion at this point in time.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, this is on 622.040A2, item 2. It's on page 39. Require a local, no, that's the wrong one. It's on giving the property or the director discretion to require a property manager after an incident where the owner was non-responsive. All those in favor?
Excuse me, Madam Chair, you used the word discretion, so are we voting on the modification, or are we voting on what the VHR board considered and rejected?
On our modification,
On our modification,
yes,
which is give the direction.
our
Okay.
modification. Given discretion, all those in favor?
Aye?
Aye. All those against? So it passes. Dan St. John votes against.
just to be clear again, it wasn't a formal motion, so nothing technically was passed. It was just a tally of votes, 6-1.
6-1. Okay, 8 nights. The recommendation of the VHR board was for 8 nights. All those who supported that? In favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those against?
Nay.
Nay. So that's a 6-1. Code of conduct. All those who support code of conduct.
Could I just make a suggestion? You made a very good point about item 4.
Yes.
Because I might support the code of conduct, but I might also support not having item 4. So since that
Yes.
got a lot of discussion, would you want to just maybe do a tally on item 4?
Yeah. Let's first, code of conduct as written. Those who support code of conduct as written.
I apologize. The code of conduct incorporated as an enforceable document or something that should be included?
As written.
As written as an enforceable document.
As, to pass that as written to the Board of Commissioners. All those in favor? One person. All those who support passing the Code of Conduct onto the Board of Commissioners minus item 4.
Aye.
All those in favor? That's 4 in support. 3 against.
Madam Chair, I would favor removing 3 and 4. So it's, again, we're nuanced
Okay.
on some of these.
Okay.
Can I have a point of clarification? Who were the nays on that?
Aye.
Let me just go down. Item 3, item 4. Oops.
Okay, responding to the complainant. This is a biggie. All those in favor of requiring the local conduct to respond to the complainant. Those in favor? Dan St. John. Those against? Six against. Actually, I'm neutral. That's Jim McCallum, Lori Lyle, Paul, Kirk, Bryce, and I'm neutral. And those are the most contentious ones we had.
Madam Chair, just for the record, could we discuss the renters,
Yes,
just so that it's on the record, please?
yes. And 13A, which is 97, 96. There's page 96. Which is under item 96, 94.
It's on page 97 of the packet. Madam Chair.
Yeah, I'm looking for the total item number. I know it's 040.
You won't find it up there, Ernie, because it's
I
not
think
there.
it's C13.
Okay, C 13A. The minimum age to rent a vacation home rental is 25 years. The addition would be renters must be personally present during each night that the VHR is occupied. I asked the VHR board during their last meeting to consider adding that language because I had a concern that it's very possible, and it has been done, not on a continuous basis, that the program director was aware of, but it had been done, and I was aware of others who had done this, that renters are renting units and then allowing their children who are underage, under 25, to come and use VHRs. And that's a consideration. One, it's fraud, and two, there are liability issues. AJ clarified that renters are not necessarily guests. They're two different things. Renters sign the contract with the county. Guests do not. So I thought to clarify that language in the ordinance made sense, and I asked the VHR board to consider it, and they discussed it, and they added the language. Would you like to speak to this?
My recollection was that this was presented last minute, like as Mr. Hames said first. We had a very short time frame, and we were getting through a lot of conversation. We went through these point by point. That made absolute sense to us. It makes absolute sense to me from both a neighbor and a VHR permit holder. I would like a county code requiring the person who I think is going to be there to be there. And if you want to rent for someone else, you can reach out to the owner and say, I want to pay, but these are the people who are going to rent. All those things are possible. But when you have someone who signs up over 26, that VHR permit holder needs to be aware that that's the person. Of course, they're financially responsible, but that's a hard thing to figure out later on. It's the conduct, it's your community situation. To me, if someone wants to allow someone else to pay, they ought to have, they can change their contract to say, this person pays, but this is the person who's going to be there. And the way these contracts are written is it implies the person who's paying and renting, sign the contract is going to be there. It's not explicit, but it's implicit. And to me, this is a great protection for our VHR permit holders that I'm not renting on for someone's behalf. And Mr. Klutz was saying that, he's rented for his children. I don't have a problem with that. I've done the same thing. But when I check into a Marriott, that Marriott knows who my kids are and they're going to be there. And I think we need to be transparent whether the person who's renting is going to be there. And I think we may have short-circuited the system of saying that you have to be on site. I understand the Glenbrook issue. We can make an exception for the Glenbrook issue because that's a different thing. What's on site? We didn't define that either. Well, if you're in Glenbrook, you're probably looking after that VHR as well. Hopefully, we can agree on an objective. The objective is that someone is not renting for someone else who cannot. Someone under 26, someone that, for a bachelor party, but we don't allow bachelor parties. So to me, hopefully we can agree on the objective that it ought to be transparent of who's going to be in that VHR. And if you're going to rent for someone and you're not going to be in that VHR, it ought to be transparent to the VHR permit holder who's going to be there and who is not going to be there. Like I said, we didn't, by the way, this is Keith Meyer for the record, and that is my personal opinion. We did not have this debate. It was brought up, it made sense, it was in our mind what I think the objective was, and that's why we thought it made sense. All of the other things is my personal opinion. We did not have that conversation to my recollection. Mickey, if you'd like to add, but any questions?
No question, just a comment. I don't disagree with you. I think that now that I understand the objective, it's clear. The red line does not say that, and I guess that's my issue. And so my recommendation would be for Ernie, the board, whoever, before this is presented to the county commission, that you get clarity around the Glenbrook issue, around the objective. It says that the person will be there each night. I don't think that's the intent. Maybe it is, but I don't think it is. So I think we got to get clear around that. And to me, it's kind of one of those things. It's kind of inserted in there at the last minute. And as you can see, when things are well thought out, as all of these others are, and there's good debate around them, they're a lot easier to discuss and try to get to an ending on. So that's my only comment. I can't support the way it's written, but I do support the objective.
And it's always easier from a concept than to see it in wording. You know, that's all. That's why this was not by accident. The reason we stuck here, because it's very easy to apply a concept. The words can be smithed.
Paul?
I totally agree with the concept. I totally agree with the objective, but there has to be exceptions, as you've pointed out. One is Glenbrook, and the second is where we live. TBC has a lake suite, and I'll be damned if I'm going to sleep in there with some of the folks that have rented it. No, I just won't do it. The weddings for employees and things like that, they've rented it out. And they always need a sponsor of an owner who is a resident, an owner who lives at TBC. So I think that there has to be exceptions. I think that the overall intent, purpose, objective is excellent.
Jim?
I concur. I think somebody should be able to give their kids a honeymoon in Tahoe and have their name of their kids, as long as they're over 25, listed on the lease, but somebody else is paying for it and taking the financial responsibility. What I said before we started this, in my comments before, we just need to have the language. This is just it's a good solution that's going to require language to make it work. If we can do that, to take into account Glenbrook, and certainly if somebody's in the casino, when somebody comes by and they're not there, we still count them as they're not an absent renter. So I think my recommendation is that we find the language that fulfills the idea, the concept of somebody not renting it out for someone who isn't legal to be there, that this is a really good thing to have.
Dan?
Just a suggestion, notwithstanding the comment that was made that there are two unique areas that need some specific language, and I would ask staff if it sounds like there's a consensus on that, and I agree with everything that I've heard here. Bryce, thank you. But I would think staff could write something about those exceptional areas. Everything else, I'm just wondering, renter must be personally present during each night, and then a caveat, or a responsible guest over 25, or something like that. So you're never left with a situation where you don't have a responsible 25-plus-year-old in the rent or in the unit. It might be just something as simple as that. But I guess my question of staff, it sounds like there's consensus. Well, it sounds like there's consensus up here. And does staff have enough information, input to take our consensus and put it into words?
Keith?
Well, yeah, that would be my recommendation, is we have agreed on a concept to let staff do it, because it may be, sometimes you reverse it, right? It must be apparent in the rental agreement who is going to be resident. That's what we're trying to avoid, especially I got a strike. I don't want, I don't, as a renter, as a VHR permit holder, I don't want someone to rent and anyone else can show up without without my knowledge. The VHR permit holder is responsible for the performance, the operations at VHR. They need to know who's going to be in residence. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ernie?
May I? Ernie Strela for the record. I have a question. So I did make notes. The Tahoe Beach Club, Commissioner Bruno brought up. So I'm not as familiar with attesting to a sleeping area or something in the main area. So, you know, if you can send me a definition of what that is, because to my knowledge, Tahoe Beach Club is treated like any other neighborhood. Glenbrook is unique. I know what Glenbrook is, but I don't know about this situation as clearly as you do. So if you can send me what that is, like, you know, because I think that if I understand it right, the Tahoe Beach Club HOA or association, or they own that area. Oh, the residents own it.
Tahoe Beach Club is a separate corporation entity with separate ownership that it resides with the developer. The building on the beach, the pier, all are Tahoe Beach Club, separate entity from the HOA and from the condominiums.
And to rent, to use the ballrooms or the space over there, they have to have
There's
an owner.
a space over there called the Lake Suite, and it's got 4, 5, 6. It probably sleeps 8.
Okay.
And it has a little kitchenette, it has a table, living room, and you must be a owner of a unit in order to rent that suite.
So if you can send us out language for that
I'll send it to you.
space.
It's in a declaration from the TRPA. And they
All
said,
right.
we'll allow this use. By the way, this, I think, came before any of the statutes on VHRs. No, I'm sure it has, because
Super.
I remember reading the declaration,
Okay.
and I sponsored one of the employees' weddings at it.
If
But
it's
I'll
not a
send it.
VHR, it's not ours.
See, it should be.
Okay, but if it's
That's-
not in this discussion, if it's not a VHR.
I'm not the developer.
Okay,
Trust me, I'm not the
All right.
developer.
Okay.
Thank
you.
do you need anything else from us? Can we do a motion to have Ernie and AJ craft our recommendations to send to the Board of Commissioners?
I'll move, so move.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I was going to recommend that the motion be to recommend that the board consider what you said is fine.
Okay. All right. Did you get that?
Second.
Motion by the chair, second by the vice chair. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Closing public comment.
One more time. Good afternoon. This was interesting how this planning commission did the deciding factor, what goes forward, what doesn't, to the BOCC. I think there was some confusion in the public and with you how a vote should have been done. I'm hoping this gets, I'm sure Ernie will do a great job with staff on some of the confusion of this. On the last item, it said the advisory board rejected this. That piece should have just come out, in my opinion, and it goes into the parking lot. That's the term they use for the next round. I know it's urgent, and there was a violation because of children on one of these VHRs. So some of this resonates if you go to these meetings. I'd just like to see that one be withdrawn, but I'm sure you'll do a good job, and it will come back up on the 18th. I also want to bring back up that one of the commissioners asked for the advisory commission to be abolished. I hope that has been changed. I believe that that needs to be very clear, and I will bring that up at the BOCC. next meeting, that I think there are so many things to be resolved and that this board, you would benefit from their input on that. I'll get back to Barton. I'm going to urge all of you to go up to that site now because you are going to be asked to change zoning for height. The current height allowable is 56 feet. The Lakeside Casino was 63 before there was actually code in place. Barton is asking for 80-plus feet, which could go up to 90, 100 feet with appurtenances. I will let Bryce explain that to you, what those mean. I'd really like you to see what these people will have to live with, and you can get a preview of that now with the Kale project and the NDOT striping, the noise, the dust, these people, et cetera, are going to have to put up with for 2 to 3 years. I think it's very important to understand that those homes are 15 feet high. You can do the math. You got an in excess of 60 or 70 feet taller than what they're living with. I would appreciate it if you would take the time before it's winterized. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. Seeing no one rise, I will close public comment, and I would like to thank Keith and Mickey again, and Dan Ainsworth for all their hard work on VHRs. Thank the staff, and I would like to make an announcement that in October, I believe it's the 23rd and 24th, the Nevada chapter of the American Planning Association is going to have their 53rd annual conference at CVI. And the rate for the 2 days for elected officials, which you all are, is $100. And if you go to their website, the APA website for Nevada, you can sign up. So I wanted to make that announcement for you. Have a wonderful month, and we will see you in October.
Thank you, Morgan.